Earlier on in this DVD, we looked at how the system is made up of three components: the control surface, the local rack, which is usually kept at the mix position, and the stage box, which can either be kept at the mix position or put on stage and connected back to the local rack with an optical cable. Now that stage box is where we patch in all of the sources, so all of the microphones that would usually go into a conventional analog multi-core cable, which would run back up to the console. And the great thing is that straight out of the box, input 1 on that stage box appears on input 1 over here on the console, and I control it with fader number 1. And if I plug into input number 15, it will appear up here on channel 15. So again, very much the same way as you'd patch up a conventional analog system. But one of the advantages of the digital system is that from the control surface, I can move any of those inputs to any other channel. Now, you might not need to do this, but it is quite useful for a situation where you might have a failure of a microphone somewhere, and instead of having to physically repatch, you could just move another input onto the same channel without having to change the processing for that channel that you've already configured. So let's have a look in a little bit more detail how we patch those inputs on the VI console. Okay, so we're going to go back to this Vistonic screen, and I'm going to choose this channel over here, which is the hi-hat. And we're just going to look at the patching for that channel. So what I need to do is go to the top of this channel strip, again, following this straight line to the top. We're going to go up to the very top section, which we looked at earlier, which is this blue tab here, which brings up everything to do with the input. So that's where we saw our gain and our low cut and high cut filters, phantom power and phase. Now, if we move along this bottom row, we'll see the channel name, and we'll look at channel naming a little bit later. But over here it says input 1 patch. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press this little button here, and it brings up this blue patching matrix. And it's very, very simple. At the moment it says that it's plugged into input number 13, which the physical XLR on the stage box will be labeled B05. Okay, but here it's got a shortcut which tells me it's channel 13 so that I know where it relates to the control surface. So it's on input 13 and it comes up on channel 13. I could now select any microphone I wanted to, any of these mic inputs, and it's automatically patched to that channel. That's it, it's as simple as that. I'm going to go back and reselect the one that I want, which was input 13 over there. But if I wanted to, I could also look at sourcing a signal for this channel from any other place that's available. So if I selected the local rack, I could choose any one of those line inputs or those digital AES inputs that we looked at earlier on, again just by selecting them. And if I don't want any of them, I just hit none and cancel it. So go back to my stage box and reselect 13, which is the one that I want. I could also look at the inputs coming from the MADI card. So for example, if we were setting this up to playback some pre-recorded audio that's on some sort of MADI playback device, I could choose a single channel, or I could run through the whole console and just configure all the channels to be playback for that MADI device. And then I've also got an option of lexicon out. There are 8 lexicon processors, as we know, and I can pick up the left-right output of any of those 8. And we're going to look at patching lexicons very shortly. So let's go back to Stagebox. So all we're doing is we're seeing here that mic input B05 on the Stagebox, which is also the 13th sequential mic input and appears on channel 13 over here, is what I have selected right now. But there's one other thing I want to show you before we move on from what we're doing over here, and that's the ability to pair channels, so to create a stereo pair. So if I wanted these two channels here to be a stereo pair, I'll show you how to do that. So in the same area, this blue block, which is selected at the very top of the channel, there is an area that's called pairing. So if I select that, I now get these options over here. Now we were looking at input 13, which was our hi-hat. Let's have a look. I've got the option then to pair it with channel 12, which is the one next to it over here. So if I select channel 12, they're now linked as a stereo pair. Or if I wanted to link it with the one on the right hand side of it, I can do that to create a stereo pair that way. And I also have the option of connecting it with the input fader that's directly below the fader I'm working on the bank below it. So if I select input 37 and I move this fader, so I'm going to leave it, we're now in bank A, so if I leave this fader up at 5 and we go to bank B, we'll see that the fader in bank B is also at the same position. So now we've created a vertical stack, and this is very useful for if you want to keep most of your inputs on the top surface. So things like keyboards or stereo miking situations, you can stack them vertically and just have a single fader controlling those two inputs. But it's quite probable that you might just want to link them next to each other that way. So that's a very useful feature for creating stereo paired inputs. So let's exit the patching and pairing option, and we're back to our overview here, which has been selected at the top. So now we've seen how we can patch inputs from the stage box or the local rack or from a MADI recorder to any of the inputs on the control surface, and how to make stereo pairs with adjacent channels or stacking channels vertically. So let's now have a look at how we do that for the outputs.